evening. This is Charles Patton sitting in for your favorite community epidemiologist, Sister Ya. And I am Charles, as I mentioned a moment ago, I am your PC, the People's Counselor. And as we talk about normally in our other segments, is that we are pushing for people to start to understand what health equities really is. We know that this is a call-in live show, and it talks about call-in live aids, but we want to kind of stretch the paradigm a little bit and talk about health equities and what that really means, because we hear about a lot of disparities, particularly for people of color. So what we want to try to do at this time is to talk about what it really means to be healthy, and not just to be equal to other ethnic groups, but to get what we need as a group of people so that we can continue to increase our overall health and hopefully our life expectancy. Some of the recent data suggests that people of color, particularly Africans in America, or African Americans if you will, tend to suffer from conditions disproportionately, particularly when you think about hypertension, diabetes, sickle cell, which they are now coming up with some great treatments for, and also HIV and AIDS. You know, when you look at the numbers, it suggests that we are not getting the adequate treatment that we truly need. So when you think about health equities, you think about getting the things that's equal to you, or the things that you need, not what everybody else is getting, but what you need to get healthy, okay? And just let me back up for a minute. I am also representing Tacts, the Association of Clinical Trial Services. This is an organization that talks about, or at least our tagline is, bringing the science to the people, so that we can start to make sure that our community is getting all the information and making informed decisions about health care, particularly HIV and AIDS prevention and or treatment. We know that we have been dealing with that particular illness for 30 plus years, and it's unfortunate that the numbers continue to look so out of balance when you think about people of color. So there are some things that we can do, and we're going to talk about that. But once again, let me just talk about Tacts, okay? And this is our logo, and this is on the Association of Clinical Trial Services. And we can also talk about with diversity comes a cure. Increase diversity in clinical trials. Now, we know that for a lot of us, we got this mindset that being in clinical trials is kind of like being the guinea pig, if you will. And hopefully as we continue to get more informed, then we will see the benefits of that and start to get involved in the process so that we can be equally as healthy or healthier than other groups, or at least healthy as other groups, and hopefully increase our life expectancy, okay? So with that being said, let's talk about what health equity really is. If you look at the picture in front of you, we got what's called equality, and we got what's called equity. And if you look at the three characters on the boxes, when you look at equality, that means everybody gets the same thing across the board, okay? When you look at equity, you see that one person has no box, the next person has one box, and the one that needs it gets two boxes. So that basically means we're talking about equity. So with that being said, I am going to take a short break, and you will get an opportunity to sit and talk and hopefully call in and talk to the community epidemiologist, Sister Ya, who has just arrived. And I thank you.
Well, Mr. Patton, well, thank you for putting that up. Very good. Did you talk about men's health at all?
I
Oh, okay, you could have done that too. So is this the one that they had from last time or this one? Okay, well, thank you so much, Mr. Patton. I appreciate you talking about health equity. As you can see, you definitely had some of the slides that we wanted to show today in this particular concept about health equity. What I want to do is give you all a more precise understanding of health equity as it relates to African American health. Now, I know Mr. Patton was starting you all off because I was on my way here, and I think you can see that on the screen. You all are looking at two different things. So, hi, I am Sister Ya. I am your community epidemiologist, and as you were hearing today, we do definitely promote, explain, expound on the concept of health equities. Why? Because we're tired of health disparities. That's why. Now you know what health disparities are, right? Dismayed, disgruntled, you just dis. We say it all the time though. Everybody always says, well, I say health equity. Everybody always says health disparities. And to be honest, that is an ideology or a concept of measurement that says, how do you compare to another? So how do, quote unquote, African Americans compare to whites? How do Hispanics or Latinos or Latinas compare to whites? And in this country, the concept of comparison based on race is a very old concept. However, excuse me, with epidemiology, it is what we do to categorize specific demographics. So it's not so much based on, if you want to just say race only. But let me just take you down a different concept. Race is a biological artifact. In other words, I'm sure you've heard this. There's only one race, the human race. In the human race are several types of species, if you will, several archetypes of humans. And what we unfortunately have to deal with is these categorizations, which are false premises, basically. But there is some differences that are true. So for example, if someone had, let's say they had leukemia, they need a bone marrow transplant, right? You've heard of that. People with type O can give to anybody. People with type A can only give to type A. People with type B can only give B, AB, only AB. But type O, which I happen to be, your favorite community epidemiologist, I can give to everybody, and people who are type O can give to me. So we have to think of the concepts that there are some differences within our blood types, our body types. That is true. And there are some chemicalized differences, and you're looking at it right now. The content that is in our skin complexion, we know that that is called melanin. Say melanin. I know you may have not heard that before, but it's called melanin. And in melanin, you do have chemicals that come with it, just like chlorophyll, that help you process who you are in your body. So does everybody who's African American have as much melanin, dark, as me? No, they do not. However, depending on if you're white, you certainly don't have as much melanin as I do. So the comparisons of race have some physiological structures and contents that is there, but it's not always black and white. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get you all to recognize. It's not as straightforward as black versus white. And let's be honest, we also have to say not as even straightforward as Latinos or Latinas, because we have some Latinos and Latinas that are my complexion, yet they were born in a Latino or Latina area. Hey, I just saw I have a caller. Welcome to Tacts, the Association of Clinical Trial Services Health Equity Program. Caller?
Yes, very, very.
Can I hear you?
Show. We have a great show, and I just want to say this.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't matter what color you are, but some people think it does, and they can't catch anything. You know, that's crazy. They have great shows like this that are on the air right now, but if they don't want to quit having sex without condoms or protection, why don't they watch the show? You let them know, listen, you can protect yourself and have fun, but if you don't, because it's like smoking. If you want to quit smoking, you have to quit. You have to quit on your own.
Yes, right.
So in order to have sex, you got to, quit sex cover yourself up, because what's going to happen? Great shows like yours do no good, and that's a shame of talent, and it's a shame of information.
Yes, sir.
And believe me, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you go there unprotected, you just may catch it, and then they want to listen to you.
Well, you are pointing out. Thank you, caller, for those concepts. I appreciate you saying that, because what you're pointing out is risk. And what people don't recognize is risk is as long as you're human, you have risk. That's the bottom line. As long as you are human, you have risk. So risk factors can be mediated based on behavior. Behavior, not race. And there's a distinction there. For example, caller talked about STIs, or HIV, sexually transmitted infections. And when we look at the number of people who have a sexually transmitted infection, or for that matter, HIV in the city of Chicago, we've got about maybe 30,000 people that are living with HIV, but we have maybe around, it's about maybe at this time, I'm trying to recall my numbers, but about, let's say, not more than half, but about 50% are among blacks overall. New cases, we got about 900 new cases, and of those, more than 50% are black. But does it mean just because they're black that put them at risk for HIV? No. What it means is because who they network, their Facebook, their, who you are on your network, who you exposed yourself to, put you at risk. And black people tend to be with other blacks, just like whites tend to be with whites. So we call that clustering. But is it an artifact of this being black? No. But do black people need to talk about how they're getting it? Yes. So I want you to understand the distinction. The disease does not distinguish based on race, but how you get the disease is distinguishable based on race because of our socialization. If it was more integrated, you would see less of this artifact. But it is not integrated because that is not who we are, especially not in the city of Chicago. So race is not necessarily the idea, the construct that gives you the disease, but it's who you socialize with that puts you at risk. Thank you, caller. That was really insightful. I was trying to show you a video or what I'm trying to pull up here, but it's, for whatever reasoning, not opening. So I'm just going to have to just go with it because it's not opening and don't know why. But I wanted you all to recognize that as we talk about these things, we can think about how we look at different concepts. And I'm going to show you what you should see for different concepts. This particular slide here does show what we think about. And I'm not sure how much if you can see it, but you see health equity, and I'm saying equals black unity, as in black people can unify to work on health. But some of the concepts I want you to get from here is how do we develop health equity through a community capacity building lens? And that's a very difficult question because as you saw earlier, health equity has to do with the individual, the institutions, and of course, the community. But I am here to talk more about the community's responsibility to health equity. And for whatever reason, it's like the community seems to be missing in the solutions. Don't you all notice that? They always are putting the individual, like it's your fault, right? It's your fault you're at risk. It's your fault you became positive. It's your fault you individually. But I'm here to tell you, as an epidemiologist, you do not function individually. You function in group dynamics, be families, communities, and of course, society. So if I wanted to prevent something, I need to use that particular ideology and say, I need to impact you as an individual. I need to impact your family dyads or triads or how many, is in your family. Group dynamics is a part of that. And I need to properly, more specifically, look at your community and look at your socialization. Now, your nation, if you will, your cities are very huge. So, as in the city of Chicago, Department of Public Health, they look at 77 community areas within a city. But when I'm talking about health equity, I'm looking at your neighborhood, your community area. For instance, I'd be looking at the people who live in Austin. I'd be looking at the people who live in Inglewood. So much more community focused, less city of Chicago, less Illinois, and for that matter, less United States. Why? Well, because it's more manageable. That's why. It's just more manageable. In other words, I can tailor my prevention messages, all of the solution focuses that I'd like to see employed with health equity can be rolled out in a community and more specifically can be tracked better. It's just more manageable and malleable to get those messages out, and they're more specific. There is some data to say that when your solutions are more localized, it has better traction. In other words, you can get more inside of the people who live there, literally. That sounded really funny. But more penetration, we like that word too. Excuse me. More penetration into a smaller area than you could a larger area. Now, that doesn't mean we can't look at all of Chicago. But remember, if I started out with talking about individuals, and then I went to, in my case, I don't do the families and the groups because I'm much more community focused. So if I can do these as communities, when I get ready to talk about the city of Chicago, more or less communities can talk about where they fall on one side of the track or the other. Because then now we're having a bigger dialogue with more people. And the more people, the bigger the dialogue, the more the socialization. That is my approach. Guess what? I'm also willing to change the approach as it not only refer to community areas in the city of Chicago, but other communities throughout the world. Now, I know you sitting here going, now you just finished talking about we're not going to do United States. And now you're talking about the global? Yes, I am. And the reason being is because I want to look at other Black African American communities and compare those communities to Black African American communities here in the city of Chicago. There are levels of poverty, there are levels of employment, there are levels of social determinants that we can go down the line, but the comparability of resources is what I'm going after. In other words, there is a man that lives in Haiti who is 105 years old and moves as though he was 70. He is not as rich, he doesn't have as many resources, and his wife died when she was 102. What is it about that lifestyle, and not that we're trying to say to live like you in Haiti, but what is it about their lifestyle, their resources, that has made us say they can still live longer and have better health outcomes than those of us here in the United States, living as Africans outside of Africa. That's what I call as Africans outside of Africa, right? U.S. born Africans. And when you think about it into those guises, then we have a different approach to how we better our health. That in itself is the movement that I am making for health equity. Now, a lot of people can say what they want to do with it, but I'm going to change the paradigm on how we measure what is better health outcomes. That is new. And I will not use whites, if you will, as my basis of comparison, because you come back with health inequities. You come back with health disparities. You will never, in the United States, equal the higher levels of health if you keep comparing yourself to whites. Whereas if you compared yourself to ethnic groups, other African black ethnic groups such as ours, then maybe you can think about these resources that you don't get, but it can increase your health outcomes anyway. One of the things we're going to take on, and it's unfortunate I wasn't able to do it today, is going to be African American health. There was a new study that came out. I wanted to focus on it, but I didn't get a chance. And we probably should have talked about men's health. It's June. In fact, today is the solstice. Happy summer solstice, everyone. Even though the earth has changed around, you call it summer, is actually the beginning of winter. We've already had our summer, if you want to be astrologically correct. So now we're starting winter, but right in our winter, based on it's the hottest time and the longest day of the year. Happy summer solstice. Today is June 21st, and we are excited that it is the solstice time. It is the day the earth has changed. And I want to leave you with, the sun does not rise, but you do. And because of that concept, you too can make a difference. So I want you all to continue to think about health equity. I want you all to continue to talk about this in your own little dyads and triads, and keep looking out for Sister Ya. And we want to thank Charles Patton, because we are with Tacts, the Association of Clinical Trials Services. I would like to present to you different possibilities, and in those possibilities is going to be some changes. It's not going to be what you're used to hearing, because what you're used to hearing didn't help us. With all this technology, all these advanced studies, our health is just as, well, it's not just as bad, but it's not just as good. It's not the best and the stellar that it could be. And we have to keep asking ourselves why. If I can get better treatment, how come I'm not better? If I can get more access to health care, which I'm supposed to be with the Affordable Care Act, how come my health outcomes aren't well? Those are the questions I want you to ask, and I want you to be asking it from Sister Ya Simpson. Again, I'm with Tacts, the Association of Clinical Trial Services. We want to again thank Charles Patton, our people's counselor. And if you have any more questions about substance abuse use and those kind of aspects, and especially people who are veterans, and as well as those who are formerly incarcerated, please give us a call and we will work with you on those things. Again, thank you and happy summer solstice.